Word. This is when you end up in the court system because your living trust wasn't in place. It can be expensive, it can take forever, and it can lead to family arguments. So you want to avoid it. I sat down with my colleague Dave Singh, who is a top attorney, asset protection, estate planning, business planning, and probate, for an eye-opening discussion on everything you need to know about probate. Let's go take a listen. Hi everybody, this is Paul Hitchcock with Barth Calderon. Thanks for joining us here on Wealth Protector TV. Really excited to have my colleague Dave Singh here. And welcome, Dave. Thanks for jumping on.
Thanks, Paul. Glad to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. And so this is an important topic. Dave is one of our experts in asset protection, estate planning, business planning. We're talking about probate. It's a word that comes up a lot. Not a lot of people understand really what probate is and why it's horrible. So let's jump into it, Dave. What's going on with probate?
Yeah, and it's something I talk about with my clients quite a bit is, why is probate such a nightmare? What's the big mystery around probate? So essentially, probate is a court supervised process. So it's not adversarial. It's not one party suing another party like we think about when we think about TV shows and things like that. When we see a court setting, it's not like that necessarily. Basically, it's a court supervised process, which means the judge is overseeing. You're checking in with the judge, from time to time. There can be lawsuits that happen within that. There can be adversarial actions, but primarily, if it's going smoothly, you're just dealing with the judge, and the court has its own attorney as well. But what we're trying to accomplish in a probate is someone has passed away and we're trying to settle their estate. And this comes up when that person has not set up a trust. So, that the assets are passing outside of a trust. They're not going through a trust. They're not using that vehicle.
And if they have a will, they still go to probate.
That's right. So that's a big misconception. So, or a common misconception is that I have a will, so why do I need to, why would I have to go through probate? Wills equal probate, no wills equal probate. It's called intestate. And so if you have a will, that still has to be interpreted by the court, still has to be validated by the court, and then kind of processed through the probate procedure. So it is a common misunderstanding, and there, we encounter clients all the time that think that they're all set. They're going to avoid this probate nightmare just because they have a will. It's not always the case. Now, it's only relevant for clients that have assets in excess of 150,000 or real estate. Basically, those are the two conditions, and we often have both. We'll have a home, we'll have multiple homes, or we'll have other assets. And the key thing is there's no plan for those assets. So this could be a home where you only have one person on title, that person passes away. And, obviously there's nuances to that, but that person passes away. And so now we have an issue. What do we do with this home? Same concept with, bank accounts, or it could be, pieces of art. I have a case now. It's a collector vehicle that we're dealing with. So there's not a clear plan for that asset. And so we have to go to the court and say, hey, big brother, this is what we think should be happening with these assets. Do you agree? So that's the probate process. It's for someone encountering it, this is the challenge for our clients going through the probate process. Very often, it's the first time they've ever dealt with an attorney. And it's also the first time they've ever had to deal with a court. Thankfully, if they hire an attorney, they don't have to go into court typically. But it's the first time that they're kind of having that experience. And so it's really, it's really daunting, and there's a lot of mystery around it. What I explain to my clients is it's not magic, it's mechanics. Everything is very methodical when it comes to probate, very process oriented.
So if you know the mechanics, which you do, and you're on top of it, it can be fairly smooth. Is that right? I mean, it doesn't
Absolutely.
have to be out of control.
Right. It doesn't have to be. And it's surprising because some of the cases that I think are going to go really smoothly. You know, we have the families getting along, the assets are really simple. Something will come up during the probate. You know, people's relationships change, things like that happen, and the case starts to go sideways. Then we have other cases that we think are going to be bumpy from the beginning, and they turn out to go really smoothly. So it's hard to tell at the outset, but for the most part, if we have pretty clean family dynamics, you know, everyone roughly gets along, you know, as
Right.
well as families do. You know, as long as we have that setting, that we have a clear idea of the assets, we don't have a lot of liabilities in the estate, then we can get through the probate process fairly quickly. And fairly quickly in probate world means 7 to 12 months.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
you know, we're not talking, you know, light speed here.
Yeah, no. Well, a couple things, because offline you mentioned that your initial process in dealing with a family who's going through probate is really discovery of the situation, right? You're taking a
Mhm.
week, a couple weeks to understand what are the objectives here? What do you want to get out of this? I thought that was a awesome way to do it. So tell me a little bit about how it starts out when you're helping somebody.
Yeah, absolutely. And so when we first meet a family, and typically it's a family that we're meeting with, they've lost someone that they love. You know, it's often a parent, and it's typically the second parent to pass away, because when that first parent passes away, there's not a whole lot usually that needs to be done. Everything kind of goes to the surviving spouse. But it's when that surviving spouse passes away, that second person, that's when we tend to meet a family, and we see from the beginning, okay, what are some of the dynamics that we're dealing with. We may hear offhand comments or kind of throwaway comments about, you know, a sibling, and you know, we've never gotten along, or things like that. And so we spend a lot of time at the beginning. We spend more time at the beginning really getting a temperature on the case, because we want to know and we want to anticipate what are some of the issues that we may run into during the course of the case. How do we position this case to be successful? And so, you know, that may inform, for example, whether we're going to, you know, have our person obtain a bond. So that's insurance for the other people that are involved in the estate. So they have the assurance that our client is doing the right thing, and if they don't do the right thing, there's insurance to cover them.
Oh,
Right?
interesting.
There are decisions like that.
Is that
What's that?
required? Is that required, the bond, or is that elective?
It's typically required unless people agree. So when you have family dynamics, when you have siblings, and everyone says, you know what, you know, Dave would be great as administrator. I know he's going to treat us fairly. We're okay with it. They can waive that bond, and
Okay.
so that's what we try to do, right? We
Wow.
try to keep the expenses down. But some cases it's just not going to work. There's too much water under the bridge, too much baggage going on. So we won't even go through that process. We'll go right into a bond. I would say it's probably about 50-50 are cases where, you know, we have a bond in place, or we obtain waivers. But those are some of the strategic decisions we'll make right at the beginning of the case. We'll also look at, you know, what is the intention for the property, or for multiple properties. You know, does one child have a strong interest in one particular property, or, you know, do they have some understanding among the family that I'm going to receive this property? You know, mom said I'm going to receive this property, and you're going to get this one, and you're going to get cash, right? So now we start to think of things that way, and we'll start to explore opportunities for, you know, what does a buyout situation look like, or if we're selling the property, who's the right professional to bring in to support that.
Yeah, that's a big deal, because I could see where that goes sideways when you've got different asset classes, and, you know, Johnny gets a property, Janie gets, you know, stocks, bonds, and cash, but it's really not equal, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And so you've got to be, I would imagine, looking down big picture, comprehensive planning, you've got to have an expertise there to really understand the different asset classes and how to make it fair to people, so the family doesn't start falling apart and, you know, going at each other. Is that a fair statement?
Absolutely. And what I remind families to that point, what I remind families is that at the end of the day, everything has to be court approved. So this doesn't just have to feel fair to us. And this is one of the benefits actually of probate, is that everything has to be court approved. So, you know, when we get to that last stage, which is our petition for final distribution, and that's basically where we are presenting to the court that this is what we think is the right outcome here. This is what we think is fair. The parties agree, you know, these are the values that we're seeing, and then the court has to sign off on that. And so, and if the court views it, and the court will have, you know, comments and notes, and, you know, we'll explain. That's what I do a lot during hearings. It's just explaining to the court what, you know, what some of the dynamics are, what the intentions are, so that you know, they have hundreds of cases in front of them, you know, and so we have to. It's our job to paint the picture for them.
Right.
And
right.
so once we get to that stage, if we've presented it properly, if we've kind of worked the case up properly, then then it is likely going to be approved, and then at that point we can distribute the assets. So there's a process to it, and it's not, you know, it's because it's court supervised. It's difficult. It's more difficult, I would say, for someone to do things that are underhanded, but it's not impossible. It does happen all the time, you know. But you know, the attorney plays a role in that situation in keeping their own client within the guardrails. And I, you know, I'm sure there are attorneys out there that kind of take that a little too lightly, but we certainly don't. You know, that's a big part of what we do, because at the end of the day, one case is never, you know, it's not worth jeopardizing your credibility with the court. You're appearing in front of the same judges over and over. It's not a huge, you know, roster of judges. It's just a handful.
They know you.
So you can lose your credibility really quickly by mishandling a case. So.
Yeah. No, interesting. One of the last questions I want to ask you deals with, you said the time period, it could be, you know, 12 months for a probate, you know, or even longer, depending. What happens to the assets during the probate period? Let's say you own a business and or even property. What I mean, are things frozen? I mean, what happens there?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's really why I think probate can be a nightmare, is that exact question. So probate's expensive. We generally know that. The you know, generally people kind of accept that probate's expensive. It's great for attorneys, which means it's probably bad for families, right? So it's a percentage of the estate. So we know that from a cost perspective, it's you know, not great. But it's actually, in my opinion, it's the timing of probate, or the amount of time that it takes, that's really challenging for families. During that period of time, it can feel a bit like limbo, that the family's in limbo and they're not able to make decisions. They're not able to do things with property, refinance, you know, there any number of things that they would normally do with their own property. They're limited. And so the way that we cure that, and this is a period of 7 to 12 months, right? So,
yeah.
And in our case, in my own family's case, when we went through it, we were locked up for about 2.5 years. So, you know, cases do go longer. We have a case that we took over that was 10 years old.
Jeez.
You know, so, you know, these things can just go, right? And and if no one's paying attention to them, they'll just continue to go, that, you know, just kind of sit there. So the timing of it during that period of time, how do we alleviate that limbo feeling? How do we allow the family to be able to make decisions, to be able to do things with their property? So one of the things that we attempt to do when it's the right type of case, right client, is we try to get them in a position of what's called full authority, which allows them to make pretty major decisions. They can sell property, they can finance, they can, you know, they can actually do some level of distributions. We talk through that with them. But it's a solution. So what that means is, pretty early on, about 2 to 3 months in, they'll be appointed with full authority. And at that point, they can start acting on behalf of the estate, and they can make decisions. They can make those big decisions that I talked about. take action, right?
Right.
And so that alleviates, and say, for instance, if there's a business involved, they could potentially, and we have a case, it's coincidentally, it's a law firm, and the attorney passed away, but we represent the surviving spouse, and she's able to come in and make decisions, handle accounts with our guidance, and do things like that, even though there's an ongoing administration. So those are possibilities, but every case is different. And sometimes if there's, if we have a lot of heavy family dynamics, we're going to be in a more restricted environment, which means that limbo period will be in limbo as a family for a lot longer, essentially.
Yeah. Love it. Phenomenal information. I'm going to have you back because I want to keep exploring this probate. I know there's a deep well of other stuff going on with probate that we could really educate our audience on. So thanks. Thank you, everybody, for being here, and stay tuned for more episodes of Wealth Protector TV. Thanks, Dave.
Thanks a lot.
All right.